ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Mali continues to draw down despite unprecedented challenges.
Closing a mission built over a decade within a period of 6 months is a very complex and ambitious endeavor. The task is made even more challenging by a host of other constraints linked to geography, climate, logistics, and infrastructure.
Reactions trailed France's refusal to remove its ambassador from Niger.
And this is not a provocation of any country in Europe. It is a problem within an African country, within the ECOWAS region. France cannot, as a matter of fact, the 1,500 troops stationed in France.
In Liberia, 16 opposition political parties signed an MOU to prevent electoral fraud during the October 10 polls.
It's very important that we fight to protect our vote. We know what's at stake. There will be a struggle by this incumbent government to hold on to power. And it's our responsibility to make sure they don't steal this election from us.
And authorities in Benin issue alerts of potential floods following rising water levels. Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to all of our listeners in the Gambia, Liberia and in Ghana. Well, let's begin in Mali as the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission, MINUSMA, continues its gradual withdrawal from the country. As the peacekeeping force pulls out, the United Nations says it remains in the country through its agencies, funds and programs. On Monday, El Ghazim Wayne, Special Representative of the Secretary General and head of MINUSMA, briefed the Security Council on the situation in Mali. He said their work has never been more vital than it is today by providing invaluable support to the authorities and people of Mali in what has proven to be one of the most challenging peacekeeping operations ever deployed by the United Nations.
Closing a mission built over a decade within a period of 6 months is a very complex and ambitious endeavor. In concrete terms, it entails the repatriation of 12,947 uniformed personnel, the separation of 1,786 civilian staff, the repatriation or relocation of a load of approximately 5,500 sea containers of contention and United Nations-owned equipment and almost 4,000 vehicles, as well as the closure and handover of 12 camps and one temporary operating base to Malian civilian authorities. The task is made even more challenging by a host of other constraints linked to geography, climate, logistics, and infrastructure. To this end, one should add the serious risk associated with the prevailing security issues. As outlined in the Secretary General letter, the drawdown and closure of the mission is unfolding in 2 phases through 31st December 2023, followed by a liquidation period which will begin on January 1st, 2024.
El Ghazim Wayne is a special representative of the Secretary General and head of MINUSMA. Meanwhile, Russia pledged at the United Nations on Monday to keep providing comprehensive assistance to Mali, where about 1,000 fighters with Russia's Wagner mercenary group are helping the transitional government fight insurgents. This commitment comes after the death of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin last week. Let's remain in Mali as the junta has called on armed groups in the northern region of the country that had signed an ailing peace accord to renew dialogue with it as it fears of a resumption of hostilities grow following the UN mission's withdrawal. Following the call, the mediator for the groups accused Malian army planes of having bombed positions of the coordination of movements of OSIWA CMA, an alliance-dominated Tuareg signatory to the agreement in the Kidal region, without doing any damage. Francis Boniface completes the story.
Tensions have been growing for months between the central state and the groups in question. They were accentuated with the beginning of the withdrawal of the UN mission deployed in Mali since 2013 and initially pushed by the Malian authorities. Armed groups opposed the transfer of the mission's camps to the Malian army amid rivalry for control of territory. These tensions culminated with the transfer of the UN camp from Ber in mid-August, which gave rise to fighting between soldiers and jihadis, but also to hostile acts between the army and the CMA. The situation raises fears for the future of the 2015 agreement, considered essential for the stabilization of the Sahelian country, caught in turmoil since the outbreak of the separatist and Salafist insurgencies in the north in 2012. In a press release issued simultaneously, the Minister of Reconciliation in charge of the peace agreement, Colonel Major Ismail Wag, called on the signatory movement to return to the negotiation table. He added that the government remains committed to the previous agreement, as well as to the ceasefire reached the previous year. The so-called Algiers Accord was signed by the CMA, by pro-government armed groups, and by government. The jihadis continue to fight the state under the banner of Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State organization.
Francis Boniface reporting there. We cross over now to Niger, where reactions have continued to trail France's refusal to recall its ambassador to Niger, despite his expulsion by the junta. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Monday that Sylvain Ite will stay in the country despite the pressure from leaders of a recent coup. Macron also reiterated support for Niger's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, whose decision not to resign he described as courageous. According to Nabila Masrali, EU spokeswoman for Foreign Affairs, the decision of the Portuguese to expel the French ambassador is a new provocation that cannot in any way help to find a diplomatic solution to the current crisis. Now in Liberia, more than a dozen political parties on Monday signed a memorandum of understanding geared towards protecting and safeguarding the vote of the Liberian people. An estimated 2.5 million eligible voters are expected at the polls for the October 10 presidential and legislative elections. The 16 parties agreed to jointly train poll watchers, deployment of united opposition agents at all polling stations, and ensure the support to opposition candidates or where parties do not have candidate. WDL's Darlington Popper in Monrovia report.
In addition, the MOU mandates opposition political parties to establish an independent data collection center to validate vote cards at polling centers across the country. The standard bearer of the African Liberation League, Reverend Sarah Basloyanti, speaking at the signing ceremony, called on political parties to put aside their differences and ensure a credible electioneering process.
Should be doing everything we can to strengthen the democratic process. Liberia needs to be united, and we have to plant the seeds of unity in all aspects and in all domains of the country.
The political leader of the opposition One Liberia movement, Mandela Cooper, described the MOU as a major step.
It's very important that we fight to protect our vote. We know what's at stake. There will be a struggle by this incumbent government to hold on to power, and it's our responsibility to make sure they don't steal this election from us. All indications have shown that, yes, there is intention to purposefully steal this election from the opposition bloc, and we take it very seriously.
Speaking on behalf of the collaborating political parties, Alexander Comey said they will ensure that the election results announced by the National Elections Commission at the end of the day reflect the will of the Liberian people.
You know, this is an area where we should be collaborating and not competing. I also want to publicly remind President Weah that it is ultimately his responsibility to ensure the elections are free, fair, transparent, and peaceful.
This is the first time in Liberia's democratic history that the opposition is uniting against the regime ahead of a presidential election. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
We cross over now to Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu has urged his cabinet members to work diligently and prioritize the development of a strong economy that will benefit the population. He made the statement during the inaugural Federal Executive Council FEC meeting on Monday at the State House. WDL's Usman Marin Abuja report.
The head of state emphasized the need for hard work among FEC members, stating that expectations of Nigerians are high and underperformance will not be tolerated. Tinubu restated his government's policy agenda, which includes economic reform for sustainable and inclusive growth, as well as enhancing national security for peace and prosperity.
The policy agenda will be set to reform the economy to deliver sustainable and inclusive growth. Without security, there can be no investment.
The president stressed the importance of relying on the experience, skills, intellect, and networking of the appointed individuals to overcome current challenges, reiterating that failure will not be accepted during his tenure. Nigeria is currently grappling with a range of conventional and emerging issues such as high unemployment rates and threats from climate change, which the presidency says requires transformative policies and reforms to fix. These reasons and more, Tinubu said, should remind the cabinet members of their appointment.
There's a tough time right now. We must work hard and create a buoyant economy that will serve every Nigerian. But to turn things around, you have been selected to perform your utmost best.
The government had promised to implement strategies to revamp the economy, manage resources efficiently, and prioritize the needs of the people. To this end, the Nigerian leader encouraged his team to remain optimistic despite probable skepticism, as he firmly believes in their potential to accomplish great things. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, Nigeria State Oil Firm says an illegal oil pipeline has been discovered, resulting in a loss of $7.2 million per month for the country's economy. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) said on Monday that the illegal pipeline was discovered in the Wadr area of southeastern Abia State, southeast of the country. NNPC recalled that the looting of oil has a negative impact on the country's economy. Looting and sabotage of oil caused significant damage to Nigeria's economy, which relies in part on this commodity. The lowest average daily production was recorded this year since 1997, materializing the drop in oil production. Government data show that due to oil looting in Nigeria, the country's oil quota was reduced from 1.8 million barrels per day to 1 million barrels per day. Let's take you now to Ghana, where the latest survey has found that high food inflation has led to Ghanaians reducing their appetite and purchasing some essential fast-moving consumer goods (FMCG) like home and house care, milk, toilet soap, and toothpaste. According to the survey by Maverick Research, consumers of these essential products have had to limit consumption due to the soaring inflation in the country and general economic hardship. Since 2021 in Ghana, inflation, often referred to as the silent enemy of purchasing power, has been steadily eroding the value of the Ghanaian currency and impacting the cost of goods and services across the country. From Accra, Atevin Bila-Lawson reports.
Ghana's inflation continues to surge as it rises for the third consecutive month, reaching a new high of 43.1% for the month of July from the previous mark of 42.5%. Food inflation is at 55%. In the study, 26 categories were listed. They include house care products, milk, toilet soap, and toothpaste. Speaking to the findings of the survey, Atomaika, Principal Research Manager at Maverick Research, says these essentials have seen an 80% increment in price in the last year, leading to trade-offs by consumers.
For FMCG products, the price increases have changed by 80%. And Ghanaian consumers have not seen increases in incomes to that level. So what are they doing? They are substituting or making trade-offs. In order to fund food inflation is a reduction in other categories that we consume, so that I wouldn't consume as much carbonated soft drinks, etc., but I would rather use that money to fund the cost in tomato paste and other products.
Some Ghanaians have been calling on the government to act and reduce food inflation. One such person is Michael Frimpong, an artisan.
Currently, right now, if you're having 20 cedis, trust me, you're not going to get a food that is going to satisfy you. Unless you get like 50 cedis, that is when you're going to feel. You understand? And right now, the formation for this economy is 001. And so that means in the morning, you're not going to eat. In the afternoon, you're not going to eat. Then in the evening, you find something to eat.
Meanwhile, analysts expect food inflation to continue to surge until an equilibrium is reached. Reporting for NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Mbila-Lawson in Accra.
You're listening to NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and online on WADR.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Mali continues to draw down despite unprecedented challenges. Reaction trails France's refusal to remove its ambassador from Niger. In Liberia, 16 opposition political parties signed an MOU to prevent electoral fraud during the October 10 polls. And still ahead, authorities in Benin issue alerts of potential floods following rising water levels. We also have a guest interview segment, the newspaper review, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
Well, we're streaming live on wadr.org. The Beninese government has issued a red alert on the potential impact of flood and flood-related disasters. The warning by the Minister of Interior and Public Security, Alassane Seydou, called on the population to exercise caution amid dangers posed by rising water levels. James Ejepon has the rest of the details.
In recent days, several municipalities in Benin's northern region have recorded rainfall causing the river basins to rise, which eventually flooded some neighborhoods. Alassane Seydou reminded the population to respect the protective measures taken by the authorities, which in particular concern the evacuation of people and property. He also urged citizens to avoid crossing rivers and night river transport with overloaded boats, which violate water transport regulations. Specifying that the latest forecast by the Meteorological Agency could change, Seydou pointed to 3 communities to receive a recent red alert of potential flood-related disasters, including Zagnando, Karimama, and Malanville, all located in the northern region. The weather forecast in other parts of the country warns of a similar situation. Last year, Benin witnessed a typical heavy seasonal rainfall and subsequent flooding that resulted in at least 60 deaths, affected more than 197,000 people, and damaged 3,000 houses. According to the Beninese National Civil Protection Agency, approximately 37,000 acres of cropland in 40 of the 77 municipalities were washed away by late October 2022.
James Ejepon filed that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Let's take you back to Monrovia and join Ellington Popper for the newspaper review.
It has never happened during any recorded history of Niger Republic that the military would have to...
We will begin the review process with the front page Africa newspaper. Money, mission, or health scares? And the paper is asking a question here as you see the photograph of former Vice President Joseph Yuma Boakai on the front page of the front page Africa newspaper. Stay on the front page Africa newspaper. Not guilty. We see the photograph of former Chief Justice Gloria Musso Scout and the rest of the defendants who are standing trial for murder on the front page Africa newspaper. From the front page Africa newspaper, the hot pepper newspaper is up for review. Medical checkup or ECOWAS engagement? Paper is asking a question here. We see the photograph of former Vice President Joseph Yuma Boakai, now the main contender for the presidency during the October elections to George Weah. CPP opens book of condolence for fallen ANC chairman Nathan. On the back page of the hot pepper newspaper, Center for Journalism conducts fast-checking training for government officials. We will leave it right there. On the back page of the hot pepper newspaper is all about a promotion for President George Weah. Our last stop for this edition of Press Review is the newspaper. Gloria Scott pleads not guilty to government's indictments. And we see the photograph of former Chief Justice Gloria Musso Scout. We will take a summary of this story. The former Chief Justice of Liberia, Councillor Gloria Musso Scout, and others facing multiple charges for alleged murder of Chalo Musso have pleaded not guilty. On Monday, August 28, 2023, the 4 defendants were arraigned before Criminal Court A at the Temple of Justice in Monrovia, at which time the indictment was read to them. But following the reading of the indictment, they all pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. We will stop right there. If you have interest in this story, try to get a copy of this paper and read more. AML suffers another sabotage. train derails on rail track. That's Asoro Liberia. On the back page of the newspaper quickly. Make or break period. Bwaka speaks on October elections. Opposition parties sign MOU to protect their votes in October. CPP opens book of condolence for fallen ANC chairman. Dodia movement condemns killing of member. Liberia National Bar Association delegation returns from South Africa. On that note, that is how we love to conclude today's edition of Press Review. But before we go, these are the newspapers we actually followed on today's edition. We followed the front page Africa newspaper, the Hot Pepper newspaper, and the newspaper was our last stop. On that note, thank you so much for following Press Review, and bye-bye.
Many thanks there, Darlington Popper, with the newspaper review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
All right, let's take you back now to a previous story on Niger, which is still eliciting reactions following French President Emmanuel Macron's order to his ambassador to Niger to remain at his post despite being ordered to leave the country by the new military leaders. Macron told a gathering of French ambassadors in Paris on Monday that Ambassador Sylvain Ite is remaining despite pressure. He also rejected concerns that standing up to the junta in Niger could be dangerous, insisting, "Our policy is the right one," in quote. Back home here, international relations experts have been reacting differently to this development. In this brief chat, Adeni Kunu, an international relations expert, first responds to the question, what is at stake for France?
It has never happened during any recorded history of Niger Republic that the military would have to tell France's ambassador and the person of Sylvain Ite to leave the country in 48 hours. Now, no matter how you want to look at it, Niger is supposedly an independent country. You have to ask yourself, since the independence of Niger Republic, why do we still have the gendarmes? Of course, in France, about 1,500 of French troops are stationed in Niger trying to help, according to Emmanuel Macron, and what is known as the European Union, trying to help Niger Republic fight terrorism. Now, this particular thing is ridiculous to me because Nigeria, at the point it became a republic in 1963, has not had foreign soldiers stationed at its borders or within its country. So for those who are political dissectors, it is key for us to look at the antecedents of France in Niger and 13 other countries that they colonized in Africa so that we can understand that the fact that they live off this country remain reasons why they also have military intervention. The hypocrisy of France is also annoying. They looked at Alassane Ouattara, who was supposed to have left office, reviewed supposedly the rule books of Côte d'Ivoire, and is still in power. Those that should have taken over died mysteriously, yet France is still relating with that country. Ditto many other African countries that automatically converted themselves or extended their tenure. And France wants to give us the impression that those are also democratic leadership. So quite frankly, for me, I think that Niger Republic military should uproot Sylvain Ite out of that country by force and let France understand that in this country called Niger, the people of Niger can decide what they want for themselves. Whilst I am not supporting a military takeover, I'm saying that this is beginning to affect France very greatly because the entire Eiffel Tower is powered, of course, by the uranium in France. The 1/3 of the entire electricity generated in France is actually through the uranium in Niger Republic.
Let me just ask this quickly. So clearly, like you said, it is very obvious now that whatever is at stake for France is more about Paris' economic sustainability and not just about diplomacy, like you rightly said. But should France insist that the ambassador remains in Niger, what do you fear will be some of the consequences? Because there are those that have argued that France's move is quite provocative, and should Niger retaliate by using force to remove him?
Thank you very much. Let me say this. Even if people will fight to their death to make a statement, it is time for France Francophonie Africa, as we normally would describe them, to be liberated from the shackles of France. Jacques Chirac years ago have said that France is nothing without Africa. And it is obvious from what Emmanuel Macron is saying. Yes, Jacques Chirac said that. Why I'm saying this is very clear for the world to listen. They have already warned, first of all, the ECOWAS Defense Group that if there's an invasion, Mali and Burkina Faso will intervene. And I'm saying here that if anything of that nature happens and they decide to invade, there'll be terrible bloodshed, which could even result in the death of Mohamed Bazoum. And if there's bloodshed and Mohamed Bazoum actually is killed, then there's a problem. They're not asking the question. Now that France has spoken, why is ECOWAS, especially the president of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, not issuing a very serious statement against France's position?
Let me also ask, is it possible that France has come out this clear because it's presumed or suspected influence on ECOWAS to possibly use force in Niger has failed?
Well, I guess that is one of the frustrations of France. Mm-hmm. But I'm waiting to see what ECOWAS will do, because let me say this. I was expecting them to even speak strongly that there is no foreign troop that can intervene, that can actually be part of an issue that is purely an African affair. This is not a world war, and this is not a provocation of any country in Europe. It is a problem within an African country, within the ECOWAS region. France cannot. As a matter of fact, the 1,500 troop station in France should also be told to leave.
Adeni Kuno is an international relations expert. It's now time for sport news with Sankule Janko.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The first preliminary round of CAF Champions League qualifiers has come to a close, and Nigeria's Remo Stars SC edged over Madema SC of Ghana in the Battle of Neighbours after a 4-3 penalty shoots win. Madema SC of Ghana, who travelled to Nigeria with a slender 1-0 lead from the first leg, needed a draw to progress to the next stage of the CAF Champions League qualifiers. Stars found the back of the net in the dying minutes to force the match into penalties before their eventual 4-3 penalty kicks victory. Elsewhere in West Africa, Ivorian giants ASEC Mimosas also booked a place in the next round after defeating Coton Sport of Benin by 2-0 at home, throwing a goalless away draw. Real Bamako of Mali overcame Cameroon's Coton Sport de Garoua after a superb 2-0 away victory to advance to the next stage. Nouadhibou FC of Mauritania progressed to the next stage of the preliminaries despite a 1-0 defeat by Al Ahly of Tripoli, following their 2-0 win in the first leg. Meanwhile, Liberia's Liscar were stunned at home by Sierra Leone's Bo Rangers with a narrow 1-0 victory, which saw them on a 2-1 aggregate. Following last week's 1-1 draw, it has been reported. All results of the first preliminary round involving West African teams are as follows: Cotonou Sport 0, Real de Bamako 2, Enyimba of Nigeria 0, Al Ahly of Benghazi 3, Al Ahly progress on 4-3 aggregate. Remo Stars 1, Madema SC 0, Al Ahly of Tripoli 1, Nouadhibou of Mauritania 0, Lescar of Liberia 0, and Bo Rangers of Sierra Leone 1. ASEC 2 and Cotton Sport FC 0. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Christian Mukudi and Mustafa Sek for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WDR News, and Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio, English Service. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to NewsLink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newsmi FM 94.0, and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.